a school dropout. Her story is a representation of a life in most slums of Kampala.
There are several attempts and we have so many garages around. When you walk past men, they insult you. But I stayed in school. When I got to Senior 3, my boyfriend asked me out and he threatened not to pay my school fees if I refused. I was 14 years when I accepted to become his girlfriend. He forcefully made love to me, but when I got pregnant, he disappeared.
It is at this point that Nalmansi's world took a dark turn. Raising a son became more challenging.
I was discriminated at school. All the students knew that I had given birth, and they all stayed away from me. Teachers also nicknamed me Seng of the school. Then I decided to drop out of school.
But her situation was more disappointing to her father. Being a single parent, he blamed himself for his daughter's improper upbringing.
She came and told me they were going to do exams and I gave her money. But when she returned, she has never gone back to school until today. These children, they need to be raised by both parents because when we leave to work, the mother can take care of them.
Against all odds, Nalumansi has not left everything to fate. She's putting the past behind her by advocating for better life of a girl child, especially in the slums.
I now go to schools that I was fired from and take them the champion of change. Leave no girl child behind because she's not educated.
The campaign has attracted both local and international attention, with Danish Minister for Development and Cooperation on board.
It is very, very important that this is being told to the world. That with girls like Farida and projects like Plan International here in the community, we can change the world and we can do this together.
Nalumansi is now an ambassador of a girl child through Plan International and flying the Ugandan flag high against the violation of rights against the girl child at the United Nations General Assembly.
Now started in 2012 as a declaration of the United Nations. The Day of the Girl Child, celebrated every year on the 11th of October, outlines issues that girls face across the globe. Among them are issues of sexual harassment, issues of education, as well as issues of early marriage. That is the discussion we'll be having in studio this afternoon. But before that, women all across the globe are sharing stories of sexual harassment and gender inequality. But men still are not really listening, says the Nigerian author and feminist icon Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She spoke at the Frankfurt Book Fair, urging men to read books by women. Take a look.
The most powerful country in the world today feels like a feudal court full of intrigues, feeding on mendacity, drowning in its own hubris. We must know what is true, we must say what is true, and we must call a lie a lie. All over the world today, women are speaking up. Their stories are still not really heard. It is time for us to pay more than lip service to the fact that women's stories are for everyone, not just women.
Well, Jean-Paul Murunga from Equality Now joins us on Bottom Line Africa for more on this discussion. Many thanks for joining us in studio this afternoon. So the world has just celebrated the Day of the Girl Child, celebrated each year on the 11th of October. And among the importance, of this day is highlighting the disparities between men and women. As from that story we've just had there, from Chimamanda Ngozi, what is your thoughts, especially on the impact of the Day of the Child, the Girl Child?
Yes, my immediate thought is that the day has helped in commemorating and also looking at what obligations states have put in place and what measures they've tried to implement to ensure that that gap, the gap Mamanda is talking about, the inequality gap is bridged. But unfortunately, sadly enough, you realize that most of these things end up in papers, in books, in policy documents, and that's why we are here. That today, for instance, if we talk about Kenya, in 2016, Kenya launched a campaign on ending child marriage. And fortunately enough, it was faced by the UN Secretary General, by then Antonio Guterres. And then after that launch up to today, trust me, Michelle, that document is lying somewhere. That document has not been given life, and you wonder what happened after that launch, after that big occasion at KICC. And this is not only the story of Kenya. When you go all around, you go to Mauritania, you go to Liberia, you go to Benin, you go to Malawi, you realize there's a lot of paperwork being done by the parliamentarians, by the policymakers, by the executive. But when it comes to putting it into place so that these girls and women can enjoy these rights, then you realize there's a big gap. There's a very wide difference between what has been committed and what is being done on the ground.
And we're seeing a lot of non-governmental organizations, the likes of Equality Now, also coming out to champion for the rights of the girl child. But take a look at the question we're asking our viewers on our Twitter poll question this afternoon. Has Africa empowered the girl child at the expense of the boy child?
That is not true, Michelle. The reason being that if that were true, then for instance in Kenya, we wouldn't be having only 2 women governors. We'll be having probably 40. Right. So, but look at even the political environment, look at the leadership. We realize that we still have a male-dominated leadership. And if it was true that women or girl child have been empowered at the expense of the boy child, then this will be translating into our society. Seeing more women rising in the corporate ladder, in the leadership framework. But then look at what is happening. Look at when we talk about the other day, government issued statistics on teenage pregnancy. And Busia came up the leading county with 40%. So it tells you that out of 10 girls in Busia, 4 of them will get pregnant while they're still in school. That tells you that their education is compromised in one way or another because they will not complete it as had been planned. They'll have to step aside for some time, deliver, take care of the baby. And if at all they get support enough to be able to come back to school. The girl in Uganda just mentioned that she was being jeered in school, that you've given birth, you are pregnant. And if you compare this with the life of the boy child, then you realize that the girl child has a lot at risk, has a lot at stake. If her life is not well supported enough. Look at the issue of sanitary towels. Kenya passed a law just the other day, I think last year, to bring free sanitary towels for girls in primary schools, secondary schools, in public schools. This tells you that there is a need which had been documented, has been evidenced. But if you look at the distribution of these sanitary towels, we have cases, for example, in Kwale, where we are working, where these towels are being given to the girls, but they take it to the family because the family itself poor that they cannot even afford that. So then the girl will not withhold 5 towels waiting for every period, while her mom, her aunt is in need of the same. So you realize the distribution framework, the guidelines for managing these problems have not really been effective, especially at the government level. And that's why the CSOs are now stepping in to bridge this gap.
And we've been asking what efforts specifically are being put in place to secure the future of the girl child. But like you've mentioned, we do not have a limitation on the number of laws and legislation we have when it comes to children, the Children's Act, when it comes to girls. So how then do we bring this, do we close this gap in terms of, I mean, this is an initiative of the United Nations Declaration, one of which we are all party to. You know, Kenya is party to this and several other African countries. How do we bridge the gap in terms of legislation and ensure implementation of these policies is achieved?
Yes, one way we do this as Equality Now in the whole of Africa, we are pushing for governments to adopt what we call the Maputo Protocol. These are an African framework which provides for all these issues, child marriage issues, FGM, provision of sanitary towels, ensuring the girls gets education, ensuring that the health of the women and the children are well taken care of. So then, if countries adopt these policies, and then at the national level, like for example, Kenya in 2011 adopted a law on FGM, therefore it means that it translates to effective action at the grassroots level. The other way we do this is that we look at it from the resource perspective, that most governments are not able to budget for all these things. And that's where now we are calling upon even development partners, that when they're doing development, then we look at how to put in some of these measures, for example, in the health sector, how to connect it with education so that the budget of education also supports the health welfare of the girl child when she gets pregnant in school and she needs to give birth and needs to come back. So how to work in a connected way, what we call the multi-sectoral approach, whereby we bring all these ministries together to tell them that we don't need to do these things isolated. They affect the same child, the same girl. So by providing this technical expertise, connecting the governments to development partners to ensure that these issues are reflected in the development agreement, then in one way we are to push for a wholesome development of the girl child. And not only the girl child, but children in general as well.
All right, so let's talk about access to jobs to education, which has been a big concern when it comes to the girl child. I'm looking at a report here by the United Nations, and it says that 600 million adolescent girls will be entering the workforce next decade. But that being said, today's generation is moving to a world of working that is driven by innovation. So educated and skilled workers are in high demand. When you take a look at the young people,